What up, Pittsburgh Steel fans? Matty P with Shannon White, as always, with another Steelers global perspective. We're talking the case for trading up or trading down. Now, Shannon, I did a reaction video to Kenny Pickett's trade a couple of weeks back, or a week or so ago, whatever. It's been a wild time. I think it's 2 weeks ago by the time this goes to air. And I talked about, about the fact that it is a example of why picking at 20 is I called it a waste of time, right? Because you don't have a pick that guarantees you bona fide talent, but equally you're investing a lot at a position, both in draft value and in draft capital and in monetary value. Like pick 20 is still paying guys a pretty substantive amount. So my mind, you either trade up and you go get bona fide talent, my argument, or you trade back and get more picks and get more shots at it, which is we've seen over the last pretty much since the 2016-17 Rams team. And you look at all the teams that have made the NFC and AFC championships, 80% of those teams, but I mean, a team can change. The Rams team can change year on year, but 80% of the teams in the years that have made those games have had massive contributions from second, third, and fourth round picks, Ravens included. So I sit there and I'm like, I don't really like 20. I either want to move up for bona fide talent or I want to move back and give myself more shots at picking bona fide talent. With that, let's assume that people can argue with me out there and say this pick guy was picked 20 or 19 or 21, whatever. But I just think this range between like 25-ish or 26-ish and 18 is just a crap range to be in. That's my personal view. So I guess that begs the question, if we're going to take my premise and accept that, what's the case for the Steelers to trade up? And I guess what's the case for the Steelers to trade back? Because there's many ways to skin a cat. And you, as we talked about recently, are keen on quality over quantity. But at the same time, the Steelers have a bunch of needs. So how are you feeling after the first wave of free agency about the Steelers trade up and go get like a top guy, or they trade back and keep filling needs?
Well, when you're picking in around the 20 range, 17 to 22, 3, which the Steelers have for a decade, it's a sign that you are in a purgatory of mediocrity. And the Steelers are just stuck there. And like I've said all along, if you change nothing, nothing changes. Mm-hmm. Well, we're seeing a lot of changes since Khan's taken over.
Yeah.
And so I expect Khan, the way he's already handled this offseason, he's filling in this second wave of free agency, he's filling a lot of depth issues with quality proven depth, professionals. And so therefore they don't feel an incredible need to reach. The problem is there really wasn't anything on the free agent market. They talked to Morris at center. And obviously he wanted to go to an opportunity with Jacksonville, which he would, because he knew it, as everybody knows, the Steelers are looking for their next legacy center.
Yeah.
So he would be a bridge center. Like, you know what a bridge quarterback is. He would have been the bridge center. So now the Steelers are kind of in a position, Connor Williams is out there, but he's coming off an ACL. He'll miss the beginning of the season.
I'm still a fan of him. I'm still a fan.
Yeah, but he's just not an answer for the Steelers this season. And then there's other guys that are undersized and different stuff. So to me, the Steelers, they had no reason to hide it. They're looking for a center in the draft. And when they talked, if you remember, Khan said that they would consider trading to acquire a center. I don't think they meant trading for an already NFL center.
I think
they meant trading to acquire a draft, a center.
And I agree with you, because apart from like a Frank Glasgow at Detroit, and they're not trading him, a Linderbaum, then the Ravens aren't trading him. A Creed Humphrey, they're not trading him. I liked Corey Linsley, but he was older and I think that he's either has or will medically retire. Kelsey's gone as well. Like, there's not a lot of centers around the league that I'm like, oh, yay, let's go trade for that guy. That's not there. Like, the Steelers' hand is forced. They have to go get a center. The league's hand is being forced. There's really not that many great centers around. There's barely a handful. So yeah, I completely agree with you. I think the Steelers are in a position where if they're trading, they're trading to get their center.
So, to me, I don't want to see but Dan Moore starting anymore. I mean, I really have nightmares about it. He was, according to PFF, which I don't put a lot into their grades, but in this case, it does pass the eye test. He was graded the lowest offensive tackle in the NFL last year. And I agree with that. He can be a quality backup, a swing tackle, but he cannot be a starter full time for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Well, and also the Steelers isn't traded up to get Broderick Jones to play left tackle. Put him at left tackle. Figure the right tackle out.
Exactly. And the guys that we love, Fiagu being the number one guy that if I had an opportunity to pick or select, what if he falls to 14 or 15 and the Steelers are like, let's try to move up?
Don't tempt me. Don't tempt me.
I mean, you'd have to consider it. I mean, he's that good.
Consider you do it. You just do it.
You plug and play. He's going to destroy people at right tackle. So,
and he gives you guard. And the other thing too is he gives you guard depth. Like let's say a terrible injury happens to James Daniels or Sam Arnold, and Sam Arnold is getting up there in age. Yeah. You can plug and play for Wager at guard for a little while, and you can bring your league worst tackle back in Dan Moore, right? Or at least they could develop someone. They might have an undrafted guy. They might there's options. But for Wager, I don't think he could play the guy at center. He's too damn big. But he can play the 4 other offensive line positions if he needs to.
I just want him at center. I mean, at tackle.
No, so do I. But I'm just saying.
I want him mauling people. I mean, because I love just watching him. I mean, it's entertaining to watch him.
And his footwork, I love his agility and footwork.
So if you moved up there, you might have to use some future draft capital to move up again to get your center. But I agree with you, setting at 20 when you might not take as much as you think, because it did cost them a lot to get Broderick Jones last year to move up a few spots. I think, and I think Broderick Jones was a wise decision because I think he's going to be a very good professional and a very good Steeler for quite a few years. I feel the same way about Fiagu. And you have all these quarterbacks. You have all these wide receivers. You have defensive players that are going to be up high in that early round. The Steelers might not have to move up too far. But setting where they are, if you get a guy like Mims to me, with that wingspan, that height, and that mobility, he's very much like your Orlando Pace, guys like that in the past. Just that perfect specimen. He's raw, but he has so much potential. So, and then if you trade back, and that means you're probably targeting a center. Because what tackles would you move back and still be able to get? Guyton, Latham,
Morgan,
maybe Mims,
Morgan.
Well, to me, Morgan's second round. I mean, I might be wrong,
but I could see him going. Round. I could see him going, especially to someone like the Chiefs at the back of the first.
Maybe back of the first, yeah. Because he is a good player. I wouldn't mind the Steelers getting him in the second round, but that would mean they'd have to go in the first round for a center, and I think you'd want to at least go late first round if you're going to do that. That 30 to 40 range is the best for a center, in my opinion.
I've got a question for you. I was just trying to look at the running back market, right?
Yeah.
Now, they got Madison out of the Vikings. I want to throw, me, I just like thinking outside the box and being a stirrer.
Yeah.
I was looking at teams that need a running back, and I don't think the Vikings are there because I think the Vikings are going to move up to go get JJ McCarthy. The Jets don't need one; they've got Breece Hall. So if the draft order stays as it is through the first 14 picks, would you trade a first rounder right? Najee Harris to go get the first rounder from the Raiders at 13. We can go get Fuaga. You might be able to get a wide receiver if there's a run on quarterbacks and cornerbacks to start with and tackles, right?
Mhm.
So you might go like a Dunze or something like that, right? But let's just say it's a Fuaga. So you trade Najee Harris, your first round pick, and you get their first round pick, and you get like a third or a fourth and a fifth or something mid round, but you don't get a second round pick, or you might even get a future, top pick, like a future second or something, or a future third. Would you make that trade?
So you're saying swap first round picks.
Yeah, and they get Najee Harris.
And they get Najee to move up to maybe 15 to get
no, to 13, to 13, to 13.
To 13 to get Fuaga. Okay. I would strongly consider it. Now, the reason why is you have Warren, and there is some guys in the mid rounds of the draft that I think you could bring in because behind that line, you're going to have a dominant running game, I believe.
Exactly. And you're going to, in a position where you've got to make a decision on Najee's fifth-year option.
Yep. But did you see the video on Najee this week?
Slimming, yeah, looking slimming.
I mean, I told somebody last night, I said, hey, look like he's about 225. I mean, and he was like 240 last year. He might be 230, but he's cut some massive weight. Now, with all that outside zone, and he knows what to expect, I'd like to keep him and have him running behind Fuaga, but, you have to look at all options at this point.
And I just wonder whether Najee is trade bait in this draft because he's got a fifth-year option coming up, which won't be that expensive. But another team could get him.
Ain't it?
Yeah, so that's 6.4. It's like what I said to you, though, a few weeks back when we talked about this. I don't think you take it. I think you offer Najee a 2 or 3 year deal. The third year you can get out of if it's a 3-year deal. The 2-year deal averages $11 million. It's $10 million basically paid with like $4 million guarantee and $1 million in incentives. Hunky-dory, right? But the Raiders need a running back, right? Yeah. And 20 still gives them choice for the positions that they want to go after if they're not going up and, grabbing a guy and moving way up the board. I just think Najee could be more trade bait into the draft than what people think. I'm not sitting here going, I hate Najee. I want Najee gone. I'm not saying that. No. You want to build this line, as you said, to have him run behind it. But it's almost, and I know that Arthur Smith splits carries between running backs. But Najee is probably one of the better running backs and cheaper running backs in this league. And for a team like either a team that needs a starting running back because they're a few good blokes away from a championship, or for a team that is used to an inside runner, which that is the case when you look at some of the big runs that Josh Jacobs broke for the Raiders.
Yeah.
There's just something there. And people forget he grew up in Oakland, for a long time. He grew up in that area, right? Now, I know they're in Las Vegas now, but he has a relationship, with that area, with that sort of organization, etc. So I don't know. I just want to throw out there.
We've talked about it a few weeks back, outside the box thinking. Now, I remember the Patriots had to make a decision on Chandler Jones. They were getting ready to have to pay him, and he was going to be one of the highest paid defensive players in football. And he, they were coming off a couple of Super Bowls, and they traded him and got a good return out of him and went on to win more Super Bowls. Because one thing about Bill Belichick and the Patriots, they didn't become enamored and with their own players. They realized that it was a business, and at times you had to, make a trade like that, and which could be beneficial to both squads. The Steelers, the days of watching guys retire only wearing the Steeler uniform are going to be few and far between.
Yep.
Because if you hold on to a guy too long, see, I'm kind of leery about the Cam Hayward situation. I've got the Cam Hayward jersey I had on last night. I really love Cam Hayward, but he says, I'm not taking a pay cut. He knows how much money the Steelers are going to have, presumably next year. They're going to need it all. The Steelers always spend up to the cap. They're going to need it all. And you're counting on a guy who's going to be 34, 35, coming off the injury that he had last year, and injuries to older players they become more and more frequent.
So,
I don't like having that much money tied into a guy at that age. But the Steelers have always done that because we want them guys to retire in the black and gold.
but
the smart modern day roster building, you don't do that.
Well, so this is an interesting area where I think the NFL are far behind everyone else, right? And other sports leagues around the world. So, and I'm not the deepest, like I don't really follow Australian rules football or AFL that we call it, where you get a lot of these punters. That's not my sport in Australia, right? I don't really follow that. But they have a draft and they have a free agency, which is unique. The two other rugby codes in Australia, rugby league and rugby union, they don't have free agency and draft. But in the AFL, which is this Aussie rules football where the punters come out of, in their draft, they have a father and son rule, which means that if your father played for a club, there are ways in which the draft can be manipulated is the wrong word, but there's compensation that can be given. There's ways where a team's able to bring you into that organization and continue that legacy. Likewise, in the NRL, which is rugby league, which recently played in Vegas to start their season a couple of weeks ago, where you've seen a lot of players like the Jared Hayne, who's an infamous, and we don't really want to talk about him because he's a criminal. He played for the 49ers, and you saw Valentine Holmes on the New York Jets roster. He was another rugby league player. But there's a big discussion right now because of their salary cap around doing what's called a hometown or homegrown player discount, which is if the player, because they tried to put in a draft years ago and it actually got challenged in the Australian Federal Court for restriction of trade, right? Because you're limited on where you could go. And it used to be also, before that, it was district based where you had to play junior ranks, before you were like college age in America, and then you could get selected for the club. Anyway, they're considering right now a homegrown player discount or hometown player discount, where if you have played for the club since your effectively rookie years, at a certain point, whether it's at the end of that first contract or whether it's by age based, then a certain amount of your salary comes off the cap number. So it might be like 30% or 20%. There's a big debate about how much that should be. That's why it's not happened yet.
In the professional leagues in America, the Major League Baseball don't even have a salary cap.
Correct. And basketball may
I'm not going
to
try to explain that. I'm not going to even try to explain that. But as you said, the NBA, there is the tax, luxury tax. But starting out in negotiations, you can pay your player more than anybody else can.
Correct.
So they really have to want to leave. It's not based strictly on money.
Yeah.
So the NFL does not have that. So therein lies the problem when you get to guys Cam Hayward's age, and TJ Watt is in the next couple of years is going to be approaching the same situation.
Yep.
If the production doesn't match the cost, the team is not going to be able to compete for a title in their, what looks like their productive years and their time with the franchise. The Steelers are going to have to start making them tough decisions. And I think that they're in that situation right now. And everybody's like, well, it's okay because we're going to have all this money down the line. They're making it work. Yeah, there's a difference in making it work and doing what's optimal for the franchise. And I don't think they're doing what's optimal right now. And the only thing the Steelers can hope for, and we can all hope for, that he has a bounce back and we get the old Cam Hayward. But I have a feeling with that type of injury, some of that explosiveness is gone and it ain't coming back.
The only thing I will say is, and I don't think we've ever fully known about the groin. And I guess I want to just say my point earlier was that, like, perhaps the NFL should look at brand and legacy and come up with a solution here, because I think it is nice to have a few fairy tale stories about guys retiring with the same team like Fletcher Cox and Kelsey. And I think I like it. Although I think Cam probably should want to move on anyway if he wants to win a Super Bowl before he finishes up. But I guess with a groin injury, like I tore my adductor basically almost off the bone when I was a teenager, and I sat out a full year. And my physio at the time was a professional sports physio for one of our major teams. She just finished up a contract with one of our major professional sports teams. And she said to me, if you were any older, I would have sent you for the surgery and you would have bounced back in 6 weeks, good as gold. But because you were a teenager and you were still growing, I don't want to do that because there could be a side effect to that. And I was like, okay. Now I was like 16. I'm in my mid 30s now. That was, let's call it 20 years ago, even though it was a little bit less than that. It's also not America, with some of the medical stuff you guys were able to try and the medical system that you have, and research hospitals and those sorts of things. I also wasn't a professional NFL player. I know he came back from the injury, but like Cam's only 18 months older than I am now. I sat out that full year, whatever. I have virtually never had any pain on that adductor ever since, right? But the way I was treated was perfect. I know it's NFL football. I just think if anyone can come back from the groin injury, and I don't think he's going to be what he was, but I think he can be better than last year. I have confidence, because I have confidence if Cam couldn't do that and he was going to be worse, he wouldn't come back. He may as well just retire. Like, I feel like I can trust Cam.
I don't see. He wants a chance at a championship, and I believe that he would come back regardless. I don't think he wants to leave Pittsburgh, but if he plays after this coming season, I think most likely it will be elsewhere. Whereas he can pursue a championship if they don't think the Steelers are there.
Yeah.
Because, let's be honest, it's going to depend on this draft. It's going to depend on, is Wilson look like an answer or is Fields look like the answer? If they're going to actually be a contender. So
very good point.
I'm just concerned because I've watched so many of the guys through the years get to that age, get to that level, and suffer core injuries, much less knee or Achilles, and then it's just never the same.
Totally.
And the body can only do so much. But I still have high hopes for this year, but I just think that we're going to, like, if TJ Watt retires a Pittsburgh Steeler, it'll shock me, because I think we're going to see the Steelers have to move away from that.
I think while the Rooneys are here, there's always going to be a player that they're keeping as a legacy player if they're proven performers.
You could get away with it at a quarterback because of the position, because of the protection they get automatically. And if you have a good enough offensive line and supporting cast, a guy can be older. Look at Peyton Manning. Yeah. I mean, he won a Super Bowl in his arm. He was nowhere near what he once was.
Yeah.
But any of the other positions, especially a defender.
True.
You take an absolute beating. And I just don't see I think, Fletcher Cox, he could probably have still tried to play a little longer.
That's the point.
But the body just ain't willing anymore.
And Aaron Donald. Aaron
Donald's still near his prime. I mean, he's not been far removed from his prime, but, he's just like, he won the championship, and now he's just like, I can't do it to myself any longer.
Totally.
And now these guys they're so rich when they retire.
That's true.
That they're like, hey, I'm going to enjoy this while I still got my, my arthritis ain't so bad that I can still enjoy my life.
Yeah, very, very true. Very, very true. Well, that's going to wrap up this segment of the Steelers Global Perspective. Enjoy the conversation as always, Shannon. I hope everyone else did too. But leave your thoughts in the comments. Do you feel the Steelers should trade up, trade down, or stay at 20? If you want to stay at 20, it's might not be like necessarily what I think, but I'm really interested as to hear why, because there's so many ways to skin a cat. No cats were harmed in the making of this video. But it is an interesting conundrum that, and as Shannon said, we're seeing this year on year, the Steelers are stuck in draft purgatory because they've not been terrible, but they've not been successful, right? So, perhaps in a couple of years' time, we can be, should the Steelers be trading up from the 32nd pick? Wouldn't that be a lovely conversation to have?
That's perfect.
But that will require them to move back or move up in this year's draft. I'm Matty P. As always, go Steelers.